The movie kicks off in Tokyo, Japan. There, three special teams got a tough job to stop some bad terrorists who'd grabbed regular folks in an office building. These three were the NPS team, led by Captain Kashi. They had Iruma, who's a sharpshooter girl, and Mukai, who's a tough soldier guy. The next gang was from the police, and Captain Masahiro was in charge there. One of the members is named Suga, who serves as a sniper. Lastly, we had the Navy crew, led by Captain Kurata. The NPS is a special force from the Japanese military, the police squad comes from the cops, and the Navy are the sea soldiers. The job was mostly on the NPS team because they needed to surprise 8 bad terrorists. They took a helicopter, thinking they'd swoop down like superheroes. But 2 terrorists on the roof started shooting at them. When all that action happened, Iruma, the sniper from the NPS team, didn't waste any time. She took down those 2 rooftop terrorists who were causing trouble for their helicopter. After Iruma did her thing, Mukai and his buddy jumped into the action. They had a big showdown with the bad guys inside the building. The NPS team managed to take down all the bad guys without hurting them bad. The terrorists were deliberately not killed for trial. Their mission turned out successful, and the Japanese government was really happy with the 3 teams' hard work. But Iruma wasn't completely satisfied with her skills. So she decided to go back to training. She even went to the shooting range to learn from Suga, a top-notch sniper from the police team. Iruma was seriously impressed by Suga's sharpshooting skills. He never missed and always scored a headshot. Once Suga felt like he trained enough, he decided to share some advice with Iruma. He told her that a sniper needs to be brave enough to take out the target without hesitation, aiming for those crucial spots in their body. Suga stressed how a sniper is like the last line of defense, protecting their team members. After giving Iruma some advice, Suga took off, leaving her to practice on her own. On the flip side, Mukai wasn't entirely content with how their mission went that day, so he spent his afternoon practicing martial arts. The very next day, something unexpected happened involving the Prime Minister, Mr. Nango. He had this idea to sell old nuclear reactors so they could be turned into clean energy in France. What's more, there was a cargo ship called Akatsuki on its way to France carrying these nuclear materials. To make sure nothing bad happened, the Japanese Prime Minister sent a Navy team to guard the Akatsuki ship using another ship for protection. Inside that escort ship, the Navy team was practicing a simulation to prepare for possible pirate threats. The simulation was led directly by their commander, Captain Kurata. Once Captain Kurata saw how sharp and ready his team was, he couldn't help but feel proud. He even shared a keychain with everyone, which belonged to his son, Hiroki. Captain Kurata mentioned how Hiroki had big dreams of becoming a Marine, following in his footsteps. Now, back in Tokyo, it was school time for Hiroki. He hopped onto the school bus, all smiles, cracking jokes with his pals. Meanwhile, in a different part of Tokyo, there was a retired commander from the Japanese secret agents, Mr. Kondo. He had a visitor, a colleague named Sugawara, who happened to work for the Japanese Prime Minister. Kondo is not as young as he used to be, and he's been dealing with some serious health problems. In fact, Sugawara had to lend him a hand with his medication when he came over. While they were catching up, they started talking about Masaki, a former secret agent who people said might have gone rogue. Meanwhile, back on the Akatsuki ship, they were doing their best to keep things in check. Some Navy members even hopped on board to make sure everything was okay. But just when they thought things were safe, a ship hijacking happened. Surprisingly, it was the Akatsuki ship's own crew members who turned on their Navy guests, taking them hostage. Returning to Tokyo, an unexpected situation also occurred because the school bus that Hiroki was on was attacked by 2 terrorists. They stopped the bus and grabbed everyone, even the school kids. Meanwhile, over at the NPS team headquarters, Captain Kashi and a scientist were deep in a discussion about making some new protective shields for their team members. And then, out of nowhere, they got hit with breaking news. The school bus had been hijacked by terrorists. That news reached Captain Kurata, the Navy team leader who was busy with the whole Akatsuki ship situation. When Captain Kurata got wind of this, he was thinking of bowing out of the mission to escort the ship to France. But before he could make that call, he got summoned to the captain's room for something big. When he got there, he was informed that members of the Navy team had been taken hostage by terrorists who had hijacked the Akatsuki ship. Those terrorists started sending Morse code signals using flashes of light. They informed that they had hijacked the Akatsuki ship and we would return to Tokyo. The news of the hijacking of the Akatsuki ship was immediately conveyed to the Japanese government. Nango, the prime minister, didn't waste any time. He called an emergency meeting with his government officials. They were all sitting there, thinking about the worst-case scenario if these terrorists decided to set off a nuke in Tokyo Bay. The Japanese government didn't mess around. They sent in the police team to help out the Navy team dealing with the Akatsuki ship mess. When the police team arrived on the escort ship, they huddled up to figure out what to do next. The hijacked bus made its way to a mall in Tokyo. The NPS team didn't waste any time. They swooped in and surrounded the bus to save the hostages. But the Japanese government got a call from Masaki. He spilled the beans and admitted he was the brains behind both piracy stunts today. Masaki then demanded a ransom of a very large amount of cash from the Japanese government. The NPS team wasn't going to let this slide. They sprang into action, splitting up to handle different tasks. Some were on the hunt for Masaki, using the phone signal that popped up on Nango's cell phone. Meanwhile, Captain Kashi sent Iruma, their ace sniper, to rescue the hostages. Iruma was locked and loaded, ready to take that shot, and when she did, the NPS team stormed the bus. In the end, the mission to free the hostages was successful. But Hiroki got caught in the crossfire. Turns out, a piece of shrapnel from Iruma's rifle hit him when she took down the bad guy. Meanwhile, another NPS team got a lead on Masaki. They tracked him down to a nearby mall, but Masaki wasn't sweating it. Even with the NPS team closing in, he had the nerve to threaten them. They couldn't do much because he still had control over that Akatsuki ship. So, in the end, they had to back off and let him slip away. The news about the Akatsuki ship getting hijacked hit the headlines soon after. The ship had sailed right into Tokyo Bay, sending everyone into a frenzy. Meanwhile, Masaki made his way onto the Akatsuki ship after giving the NPS team the slip. When Captain Kurata and his Navy crew found out, they were shocked when they found out that all the workers on the Akatsuki ship were Masaki's men. They consist of several mercenaries and pirates. At the hospital, Hiroki was rushed into the emergency room. They were prepping for surgery to stop the bleeding. Dr. Munakata, who happened to be on the night shift, also had to hold back Hiroki's mom from barging into the operating room. Before long, Iruma, accompanied by Mukai and Captain Kashi, came to check on Hiroki. Iruma felt a heavy sense of guilt as she saw Hiroki fighting for his life. Back on the Navy ship, Captain Kurata had a worried look on his face when he got the news that Hiroki was one of the victims in the school bus hostage situation. Suga came by to offer some comfort and words of encouragement to Captain Kurata. A bit later, at the hospital, Dr. Munakata, who had just finished Hiroki's surgery, met up with Mukai, who was anxiously waiting for updates. Turns out, Dr. Munakata and Mukai were old pals. She gave Mukai the good news that Hiroki had passed the critical phase, but he still wore a somber expression. Mukai opened up about how he was feeling, blaming himself for not catching Masaki. Dr. Munakata, though, wouldn't let him lose hope and gave him a pep talk about not giving up on his duties. The following day, Sugawara paid another visit to Kondo, the former commander of the Japanese secret agents. During this visit, he told Kondo that the terrorist behind the ship and school bus hijackings was Masaki. To Kondo's shock, Sugawara confessed to being an ally of Masaki, having infiltrated the Japanese government. The astonishing news took a toll on Kondo, who suffered a heart attack. Frantically, he searched for his medication but couldn't locate it. Soon after, Sugawara left, and not much time passed before Captain Kashi arrived to see Kondo. Captain Kashi was taken aback to find Kondo lying motionless on the floor. In his final moments, Kondo revealed to Kashi the identity of Masaki. According to Kondo, Masaki had once been his subordinate in the secret agent unit, but he had joined the agency solely for revenge. His target of vengeance was the Japanese Prime Minister, Nango, who had caused Masaki's father's business to go bankrupt due to Nango's controversial policies. Back at the hospital, Iruma still carried the weight of guilt from the tragedy that occurred yesterday. She anxiously waited for Hiroki to wake up. Before long, Hiroki's mom approached her. She comforted Iruma, understanding the sorrow of yesterday's accident. Hiroki's mom could empathize because her husband also served in the military. She knew the risks and sacrifices that came with being a soldier on duty. Meanwhile, Masaki reached out to the Japanese government once more, reiterating his demand for the cash ransom promised in exchange for the Akatsuki ship. He also insisted that the Japanese government send the money along with the Japanese Prime Minister's staff to the Akatsuki ship. This message made its way to Nango's office, sparking objections from the staff regarding Masaki's latest conditions, which required them to deliver the ransom money to the Akatsuki ship. During the meeting, Captain Kashi grew suspicious, suspecting that there might be an intruder among the Japanese Prime Minister's staff. He couldn't fathom how all the workers on the Akatsuki ship turned out to be terrorists, especially when it was the Prime Minister's staff who had selected these workers. Upon hearing Captain Kashi's suspicions, Sugawara, who had been part of the meeting, only responded with a sarcastic smile, because no one knew that he was the very intruder Captain Kashi had been talking about. In response to Masaki's demands, the Japanese government decided to strengthen the team by adding the NPS squad to the escort ship. This move was aimed at assisting both the police and Navy teams in their efforts. Once the NPS team arrived at the escort ship, Iruma had a chance to meet with Captain Kurata and express her apologies for the tragic shooting incident that had injured Hiroki the day before. Fortunately, Captain Kurata displayed understanding and wisdom, assuring Iruma that he held no blame towards her for carrying out her duties. He went on to explain how the tragedy had unfolded, based on information from the investigation team. In essence, the unfortunate incident had resulted from Hiroki's own actions, as he had attempted to be heroic and confront the terrorists when he saw his friend being held hostage. In the chaos, Iruma had accidentally fired her weapon, and Hiroki had been unintentionally struck by her bullet. Captain Kurata stressed that no one could be held accountable for this tragedy, as it had been a purely accidental occurrence. A little while later, a meeting involving the three combined Special Forces teams commenced. During this gathering, Captain Kashi, who led the NPS team, surprised everyone with a daring decision. He proposed accompanying the Prime Minister's staff to deliver the ransom money to the Akatsuki ship. He intended to carry a hidden camera to capture clear footage of the situation inside the ship. The following day, Nango and his team set out to transport the ransom money to the Akatsuki ship. Simultaneously, the three Special Forces squads prepared themselves for potential combat. Mukai equipped himself with the latest shield technology, while two snipers, Iruma and Suga, boarded a helicopter to conduct aerial reconnaissance. Once the Prime Minister's staff and the cash-filled suitcases were on board the Akatsuki ship, they promptly handed over the ransom money as Masaki had demanded. Initially, this appeared to please Masaki and his associates greatly. However, when it came to surrendering the Akatsuki ship, the terrorists reneged on their promise and continued their hijacking plans. To make matters worse, they now held a stronger position, as they had taken new hostages, including Nango himself. Amid the chaos, Captain Kashi sprang into action, but his cover was quickly blown by the terrorists. They captured and subjected him to torture. Meanwhile, everyone watched the footage from Captain Kashi's hidden camera, revealing the terrorists' deception. This revelation prompted all three Special Forces teams to take immediate action. The Navy team approached the Akatsuki ship underwater, while the police and NPS teams launched their attack from the air. As the NPS team's helicopter approached the Akatsuki ship, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. A rope tied to the deck prevented them from landing. Iruma and Suga, the two snipers, then attempted to sever the steel rope from a distance. After persistent efforts, the two sharpshooters successfully cut through the two steel cables blocking their way. The police team's helicopter safely landed and deployed a group of combat soldiers, including Mukai. It didn't take long for the special forces to locate the badly injured Captain Kashi, who had been tortured by the terrorists. Despite his grave condition, Captain Kashi urged his team to continue pursuing the escaped terrorist. Fortunately, Captain Kashi received timely medical attention. Meanwhile, Hiroki's health took a turn for the worse at the hospital, and Captain Kurata received this distressing news while in the midst of battle. This distraction caused Captain Kashi to be shot in several places on his body. Fortunately, a rescue team soon arrived, and Captain Kurata encouraged Iruma not to falter in their mission. Captain Kurata also handed Hiroki's keychain to Iruma as a symbol of motivation for her and the rest of the team. Near the nuclear reactor on the Akatsuki ship, Masaki had the Japanese Prime Minister, Nango, as his hostage. Unexpectedly, Masaki took control of the nuclear detonator from one of his own men and forced the Prime Minister to activate the nuclear reactor. This shocking move went against his men's plans, and they aimed their weapons at Masaki. It became clear that Masaki's true motive for the acts of terror was not money but revenge. His goal was to settle a score with Nango, who had ruined his father's lodging business with his controversial policies. When Masaki was a child, Nango intentionally turned his father's lodging business into a garbage dump. This cruel act led to the bankruptcy of Masaki's father and ultimately his father's death due to depression. Now in the present, Masaki was still forcing Nango to activate the nuclear reactor. His motive was to ruin Nango's reputation as prime minister in the eyes of the Japanese people. The news of the activated nuclear reactor sent shockwaves through Tokyo, with residents fearing it might explode. They rushed away from Tokyo Bay in panic. Fortunately, the three special forces teams launched a timely attack and rescued Nango. However, they arrived too late, as the detonator had already been activated and the reactor started emitting dangerous heat. All soldiers were ordered to cut the power supply cables to the reactor, but the cables proved extremely resilient. It seemed like all hope was lost as the reactor's temperature continued to rise dangerously. Fortunately, Iruma received new orders to shut down the reactor by destroying its intensely glowing core. Armed only with a gun, Iruma persistently aimed at the reactor core. Just moments before the reactor could explode, Iruma successfully completed her mission. Meanwhile, Mukai managed to apprehend Masaki, a formidable opponent in combat. With the terrorists now in custody, they were removed from the Akatsuki ship. At the port, Sugawara observed the mission's success. Surprisingly, Sugawara secretly approached one of the captured terrorists and handed him a gun, encouraging him to eliminate Masaki. Fed up with Masaki's unpredictable actions, the terrorist decided to shoot him from a distance, ultimately ending his life. In the end, Sugawara's secret as an infiltrator in the Japanese government remained safe and undiscovered. A few days after the tragic events, Captain Kashi showed signs of improvement and Hiroki had regained consciousness. Elsewhere, several members of the Special Forces squad were invited to a colleague's wedding. Iruma attended and admired Suga, wanting to learn more about him. Meanwhile, Mukai was surprised when Dr. Munakata suddenly proposed marriage, and the movie came to a close. The moral lesson from the story is that even in challenging situations and personal guilt, we must stay dedicated to our duties and responsibilities, as they play a vital role in protecting others and preventing further harm.